Hi, Dimitri. Hi, Dimitri. How are you? I'm in London right now. Yeah, it's a little cold, but nothing we're not used to. Those were happy days not so long ago. Thank you very much, and congratulations on this launch. It looks like you've got a good crowd as well. I'm sure you have a great day, and I'm sure it'll be a fantastic asset to the city's startup ecosystem as well. Um, as you said in your introduction, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about crowdfunding, our position on crowdfunding, and particularly how it works with the sorts of ecosystems that you're building there in Kiev. So I'll kind of go through what we mean by crowdfunding, where we are today, why we feel ecosystems are so important to the concept of crowdfunding, and then a little bit about where we feel crowdfunding is going next as well. So as you said, Dimitri, I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Crowd Valley, which is a spin-off of Grow VC, the Grow VC group. Crowd Valley was launched earlier this year, but Grow VC was really a early pioneer in equity crowdfunding, founded in 2009. It was founded to be a global marketplace for startup funding, but more than that, and as much as anything else, to be a proof of concept of crowdfunding. So not only the sort of front end, the platform side, the idea of having company startup profiles and investors and being able to make investment commitments online, but also the full, what we think of as back office financial services and processes. So everything from going through due diligence and handling money and transferring money around and creating shareholder certificates and managing the situation of having hundreds of shareholders as a small company. All of those things we kind of wrapped into this proof of concept as Grow VC. And as of the end of last year, 2011, we'd pushed $25 million through the system from investors into startups around the world. Crowd Valley was then launched as a spin-off to provide this technology on a software as a service model, plus the kind of back office financial services, particularly with an eye on the US markets because of the forthcoming regulations there, which fall under the Jobs Act. So crowdfunding as a term recently overtook crowdsourcing in terms of the number of searches on Google, and it really encompasses several different models now. You have the kind of poster child of the crowdfunding world, which is Kickstarter, and its model is a kind of rewards model or a kind of pre-order model. You have the equity model, which was the model that Grow VC went for, and then you also have peer-to-peer lending models, a bit like Kiva and others, and other models where you're effectively crowdsourcing resources, which could be time or could be equipment or could be other things like grants or scholarships. But But in essence, crowdfunding is essentially a methodology for facilitating the movement of money or other resources online from a large group of small investors to a company or a project or a cause in exchange for some kind of benefit, which could be shareholding, could be a reward, could be a loan, although investor motivations often go beyond the kind of formal benefits that they get through this process. So for an entrepreneur, of course, crowdfunding can provide access to investors, particularly when you're trying to reach beyond your personal network or your local network of investors, which of course can be very important when you're kind of not in Silicon Valley or London or New York or those places where there's a big concentration of venture capital and angel investors. It can also serve as great validation of an idea or a concept, and it can also really speed up the kind of fundraising process by standardizing documentation and moving a lot of those kind of manual processes where you to give a simple example, send a kind of business plan around or send funding models around. Those can be kind of saved online, and that just doing that in itself can save time. And it's also an opportunity to kind of build relationships with potential customers as well. But where we are today is there are hundreds and hundreds of crowdfunding platforms around the world, each of these, each with these different models. There was an industry report in May this year by a group called crowdsourcing.org, which counted up the number to be 452, and that was 6 months ago, so it could have doubled by now. Some are very active, others are not very active, some are generalist and others are very specialist in a particular niche or geographical region. So for entrepreneurs it can be quite difficult to know where to start and whether it's right for you or whether it's something that's not really right for you. I recently spoke at a conference in London about crowdfunding that was focused on the Internet of Things, the concept of the Internet of Things, and I kind of asked them what their natural kind of crowdfunding portal might be. You know, they probably wouldn't go to Kickstarter because a lot of their products are quite technically complex, difficult for the everyday person to understand, and there was no kind of clear answer there. It was quite difficult for them to know whether this was right for them. So I mean, we at Grow VC and Crowd Valley, we kind of looked at what kind of companies were getting funded through our platform and through other platforms as well. For example, on Kickstarter, if you reach 20% of your funding round, then you have statistically an 8 in 10 chance of raising 100. But 12% of all projects never get a single pledge, a single investor saying they're going to support you. So entrepreneurs that try crowdfunding and think about crowdfunding assuming that it's going to be some remarkable new way of getting easy money from strangers are really left disappointed by this whole process. And you have to kind of think about how do you get to that first 20%. Which of these crowdfunding platforms is going to help you get there in the easiest way. And we looked at on our platform again at Grow VC, and we noticed that the successful ones have very strong kind of natural constituencies that they were often bringing with them at the beginning to get them to that initial 20%. So medical device companies were getting support from local doctors, and clean tech companies were getting support from technical academics in the same kind of universities that they were in. And this sounds very obvious, but it's very important because those kind of early investors on the crowdfunding platforms understand the context that you've come from. They can join the dots in terms of where you've come from and where you're going, and they can appreciate the where your project has come from. So I mean, this was really one of the main reasons behind what we're doing at Crowd Valley. We wanted to put this idea of context and constituency and ecosystem at the center and build crowdfunding around it. So crowdfunding becomes more of a kind of natural activity, a methodology to allow people to support the ideas and the projects and the companies they understand and they believe in at the beginning, when it matters most, from the ecosystems that they belong to, which could be local ecosystems. It could be, built around a university. It could be built around an angel network, or it could be less local but more aligned with a particular sector or a particular industry. So we've seen very successful kind of crowdfunding platforms start up that are just focused on oil and gas, or just focused on commercial real estate, for example, where the investor profile and the kind of profile of the assets or the companies is very different from what you see on Kickstarter or those other kind of companies. But it's using the same kind of methodology, the same concepts to match up investors and those kind of assets. And when you look at it as being part of this ecosystem, it's clear to us that crowdfunding is not a separate activity that is in opposition or is different in some way from traditional fundraising routes like research and development grants or angel investors or venture capital firms. It's really something that works alongside those sources in a way that can be beneficial for them as well. So, for instance, in the kind of real outside world, VCs will often rely on expert opinion from academics, for example, if they have a high-tech investment, or they will speak to early customers of a product company, or they'll, if it's a B2C company, they'll try out the product themselves, and all of those things happen offline. But of course, if they can be tied into these crowdfunding platforms, and a lot of that can be moved online and made more transparent and more accessible. So we're starting to see models where the benefits of crowdfunding platforms in terms of finding potential customers, finding potential early investors, or just supporters in general, can also serve as a kind of automatic validation or automatic kind of promotion to the world of angel investment and venture capital as well. So those things can work together very well. And then, VCs and angels can then not only take recommendations from the crowd, but also take recommendations from incubators and universities and other groups like this. So this is what we're doing around the world at the moment. We're trying to identify these ecosystems, and we're trying to put in place crowdfunding infrastructure to connect all these different parts and enable this new methodology of crowdfunding between the different players. Of course, it's complex in the world of equity crowdfunding because of regulations, and fortunately, in many countries, regulations are moving towards this position where it is possible for everyday people to get involved in startups and to support startups at the early stage. But it's certainly a legally complex area, so it's going kind of slowly from that point of view. But where we feel crowdfunding is going next is firstly, I suppose, as a series of quite efficient investment marketplaces in different sectors, which will involve the integration with different ecosystems, as I was saying, different kind of universities, incubators, angel networks, and so on. A lot more co-investment models where different funding sources work together to give the best solution. And also, perhaps most importantly in the long term, as a huge provider of data and insight on how startups work and how startups can be made more successful. There's really not a huge amount of data out there in the world about small business and what makes them succeed and what makes them fail. But because these new online funding platforms require a lot of transparency from their companies, from their startups. There will be a huge amount of data created by people like Kickstarter and others, and and our platforms, of course, and looking 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it might be in the future. That's going to be a hugely valuable and important kind of source of information, so that when people are looking at kind of entrepreneurship and the startup world as a potential career path early on, they will be able to understand a lot more about what makes a good company, and what they can bring, and how entrepreneurship really works. So that's very exciting as well. That's about it. That's all I wanted to say, I think. Thank you. I hope so. Thank you very much.